Hi, guys. This is Vinnie Mirchandani. Our industry is blessed to have a lot of positive visionaries. Bill Gates, Mark Benioff, Bill McDermott. But one of my favorites that not too many people know about is Alex Shootman, CEO of Workfront. And, he is such a positive guy. Every time I meet him, he's smiling. He's positive. And he wrote a book a couple of years ago, which was about leadership, especially in times of crisis. And he wrote a blog a couple of weeks ago about resilience in times of crisis. So I'm going to ask him to introduce himself and talk about, he cited 4 examples in that. Maybe he can explain why he picked those 4 from his book, and then we'll continue from there. So Alex, come on board.
Well, thanks, Vinny. And wow, getting my name mentioned in that crew is quite an honor. So I appreciate the kind words, Vinny, and I look forward to sharing some of these thoughts with you.
Great. Well, so tell me why you picked those 4 examples from the book, because you had so many. I loved your book, had all kinds of leadership examples.
You know, it was ironic about that book, Vinny, is that the chapter where I talk about resilience, it actually starts with an experience that I had on March 20th, 2003. I was leading the sales team at BMC. And if you recall, that was the start of the second Gulf War. And March was our 4th quarter. So all of our business happened in the 4th quarter, and most of the business happened in March. And on March 20th, the war started, and all business dried up, and the quarter tanked. And that was an experience that created a lesson in resilience for me. And I just found it ironic that it happened on March 20th, 2003. And here we were sitting in March 2020 going through a similar circumstance.
Alex, it's all your fault.
Yeah, probably.
So tell me about the 4 that you picked.
The first one, Vinny, that I talk about in there is lean towards the obstacles, or lean towards the difficulties. One of the things that I've come to understand is you're going to have some failures. You're going to try some things and they're not going to work. And in fact, if you're really trying to do some extraordinary things, chances are you are going to fail sometimes. I love this quote by John Wooden, who's the coach of UCLA. He said, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not doing anything. I'm positive that a doer makes mistakes. And so for me, what I've realized in terms of resilient leadership is you have to see yourself on the other side of the surprise, the mistake, the failure, the disaster. And since you're going to have to go through them sooner or later, you might as well go through them sooner. And so what I've come to understand is you actually have to run towards the obstacles with this mentality of seeing yourself on the other side of the obstacle.
Alex, it's wonderful you mentioned that, because between all the doom and gloom, it's been amazing to see all the acrobatic healthcare and manufacturing, supply chains, now with banking, with the loans and all that. So, like you say, somebody's been coaching them about how to react in adversity and do it quick, right?
Yeah.
Right now, agility beats perfectness. So
the second one that was in that blog post, Vinny, was own your own resilience. In the first week of the crisis, we had a Zoom call with 40 of our top leaders. And one of the things I told them is none of you chose to be a leader in this moment. You didn't, but this moment chose you. And so now you got to lead. And one of the challenges is particularly in a crisis, and it could be leading your family, it could be leading in your neighborhood. It doesn't necessarily have to be leading in a company, but everything that you do is scrutinized. I remember working for a CEO who once got on a company-wide conference call, and he started the conference call and he said, boy, I'm tired. I don't know about the rest of y'all. Man, I'm tired right now. And we got off the call and I was like, man, you can't say that. If you're tired, call me up. Tell me you're tired. And it brings me back. I wanted to share this with you. Dwight Eisenhower wrote a letter to his wife. He was in Algiers on December 30th, 1942. And in that letter, he wrote, as pressure mounts and strain increases, everyone begins to show the weaknesses in their makeup. It's up to the commander to conceal theirs. Above all, to conceal doubt, fear, and distrust. And that's why I love the toolkit that I shared with Deborah Cyril in the book, because, if you're going to be leading in a crisis, you got to lift yourself up. Nobody's going to lift you up. You're not going to get a phone call that says, hey, I just called to kind of help you out there, buddy. And so the second one was owning your own resilience.
That's a great one. And it must be lonely, right? As a leader, that's really lonely to be able to not be able to share your fears and all that with others.
It is, but I think that when you, I kind of come to this, with some thoughts maybe at the end, but I think everybody's got a responsibility in this situation. Yours or mine is not more important than anybody else's. It's just different than somebody else's. I mean, I look at what we might be having to go through, and I look at what our frontline healthcare workers are going through, and we're not going through anything like they're going through. So I just think we all have to step up to the responsibilities that we have. The third one that I shared was keep communicating. But what I wanted to be maybe a little more specific, because every leadership book tells you to communicate a lot. But what's important is what you communicate. If you think about it, we have chemicals inside of us that get triggered, and those chemicals can put us on a positive or a negative flight path. If you think about it, cortisol and adrenaline put us on a negative flight path. They kind of get our lizard brain going, and that brings emotions of intolerance and irritability. It makes us memory impaired. It makes us critical and uncreative, and it makes bad decisions when cortisol and adrenaline spike. But on the other hand, dopamine, which is driven by anticipation, creates motivation and attention. Endorphins, which come from humor, can create creativity and focus. And oxytocin comes from empathy, and that drives generosity and bonding. And so you kind of ask yourself, what do you want in a crisis? Do you want bad decisions, or do you want motivation and creativity and bonding? And so what it really comes down to when we're communicating is really one word, and that word is hope. Napoleon once said that a leader is dealer in hope. And this is not irrational hope. This is realistic hope. But you got to keep communicating, and you got to keep communicating about the future and the possibilities in the future, because you don't want your team to get taken over by cortisol and adrenaline, because then it starts creating bad decisions.
Alex, one of the best things to come out of this is a mini course in biology. Thank you.
Well, and that's why I think what you're seeing on so many of our team calls, which is just really heartwarming, is we're doing these Zoom calls, and more humanity is happening on our Zoom calls right now than was happening at work. People's kids are walking in, they're talking about stuff that's going on. They're sharing their embarrassing Zoom call moments. And that is creating oxytocin in us, which creates generosity and bonding. And that's one of the best parts of human nature. The last part, Vinnie, that I talked about was when it's done, reflect and learn. This one's really simple. You can't learn without going through the fight, but you can't teach when you're in the fight. And so in the middle of the crisis, what you've got to realize is that you are learning things by going through it, but don't stop and try to teach anybody anything. Afterwards is going to be the time to teach. One of the people that I interviewed for the book is a friend of mine named Mark McGinnis, who's a retired commander in Navy SEALs. And one of the things I learned from Mark is the following, and I want to read it to you because it's a quote of his. After a mission, he's talking about after action reviews. After a mission, we immediately come together in a hollowed environment where there's no rank, no blame, no privilege, no seniority. we sit down and we talk unemotionally about the successes and failures of the mission. It's important to capture both the successes because we want to continue to do things that are working, and the failures because we can't afford to make the same mistake twice. If we repeat mistakes in my world, it's got catastrophic results. And so that's the fourth one, is we're learning lessons right now. We don't have to stop and try to figure it out. There's going to be a time, but then we really need to to take a moment and kind of figure out what we've learned. Those are the four things that I had in the blog post.
Alex, when I was preparing for this, I went back and read your book, and I said, my God, Alex has probably learned in the last 2 weeks another 300 episodes he could add to another book. So tell us a little bit about some of the new episodes that you've learned. I mean, I'm sure you've seen some great leadership. You've probably also seen some poor leadership.
Well, we talk about resiliency. What we've talked about in our company is our company's going to go through 3 phases: a response phase, a resiliency phase, and a success phase. And so I've seen a lot of things from a resilience phase, and I'm really just blown away by the positive attitude and the generosity and the customer focus of the folks inside of Workfront. That's cool to see. Pressure reveals a lot about character, and I like what I'm seeing. But I'm also seeing some cool stuff from customers. I got to talk to Elizabeth Vellini. She's at JLL, and she just shared a lot about how they're handling things. And she just shared about how they're being human in the middle of this and how that's sustaining her team. I spent some time with Graham Johnson. He's at FCB. Graham's one of the smartest dudes I know. And he had spent so many years teaching his team to be innovative. And it's just paying off right now in this crisis. And then I just think about our good fortune. We serve 118 medical technology and pharmacy leaders like Arthrex and Novartis and Medtronic and Covance. And what I realize is that real leadership in the crisis is mostly happens in the front line, right? At my level, I can say a few things from time to time, but when these people have shared with me, these customers have shared with me what they've done and what they've seen, it reinforces to me that real leadership, it really just happens one human interaction at a time.
Some heroics, right? I'm just unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Alex, one thing that has kept me positive in the last few weeks is every few years I run a series called Technology and My Passion. So I encourage people to send in guest hosts on, it could be fishing, it could be baking, it could be music, it could be their charity. And so I have accelerated that this year for various reasons. So I've had like 30 people already send in their guest columns, one of which was Erica Gunn.
Yeah.
He wrote about savory Sundays or baking.
Yeah.
Well, you smell the bread through the column, right?
Well, the next version of Zoom is actually a scratch and sniff version.
She definitely should subscribe to that. But my question to that was, I have benefited so much reading and helping all these columns come together, right? Because many of them don't know how to write. I've had to edit it and give them coaching tips and so on. And then my readers have really enjoyed reading 3 or 4 of those columns a week. So my question to you would be, how much do you think an external activity, non-work related activity, it could be faith, it could be family, it could be whatever, what do you find, how does that help resilience?
Well, here's the deal, Vinnie, and it's the hardest thing to consume in a moment like this. If you're a leader, it's not about you. It's about, you have a responsibility. And in a crisis, that responsibility is magnified like the VIX, if you think about the volatility index on the stock market. And you have a responsibility to...
We haven't done that in a few years, have we?
So you got a responsibility, and so it's magnified, and your responsibility is to suit up and to show up and to be resilient. And that's a responsibility. And so you got to figure out what you need to do to make that happen. For me, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the call. For me, I got to get on a road bike and ride about 1 billion miles. And I got to have some climbs that cause me to yell at my legs. And if you ask me about the greatest gift for me of this crisis, is that my 23-year-old son is stuck at our house. And now for the first time in my life, he's riding with me. And last weekend, we climbed a mountain on our bikes.
So, Alex, I'm going to assign you something.
Okay.
And you can assign it to your son if you want. I want that column on your biking.
Okay. Okay. Well, I've got a very humorous picture because last weekend he went up a pretty big climb. I was a little bit ahead of him, so I walked back to the top of the hill with my camera to take a picture of him while he was finishing the climb. And as I took the picture, I said, "Son, I'm not sure you're supposed to wave to me with one finger like that."
That'd be fantastic if you could.
Yeah.
But Alex, this is, you're so positive, and it's wonderful for you to share this with my, followers. So thanks again, and keep doing what you're doing, and please don't shave. It really looks good on you.
Well, Vinnie, look, we're all going through something tough, and there's no doubt about it. And the toughest part is none of us know when it's going to end. And so that creates a lot of angst in a lot of people. But what I do know is it's going to end. I don't know what things are going to look like on the other side of it, but I do know it's going to end. And I do know that we're going to get back to doing the things that we love to do as humans, and that's be with each other and share a joke, share a meal, share a hug, and do life together. And that's going to happen again.